Hello folks, MinMax Munchkin back with the video about the newest Unearthed Arcana. Yes, I'm a bit late to the party, but late is better than never, so here we go. This second part of 2020 Unearthed Arcana subclasses introduces Bard, College of Creation, Cleric, Unity Domain, and Sorcerer, which is my favorite class, Clockwork Soul Sorcerous Origin. So let's dive into their features and mechanics right away. The magic of Creation Bard is drawn from the Song of Creation, this ancient power that bards believe shaped all existence. Because of this, these bards are odd and weird, but their words, songs, and performances are equally as captivating and mesmerizing. Mechanically, they can be very effective support casters in any party at any level, though I suspect the subclass to be further polished if it becomes official. Note of Potential is the first feature that you get, starting from level 3 when you get your Bard College, or a subclass. Now, all official bards in the game, except Valor, get two ways to use their bardic inspiration once they get their subclass feature. It's often not as simple and straightforward to figure out the best way to spend this resource, because you have to choose between helping your allies or doing something only your specific subclass allows you to use it for. And I think it would be great to have a Bard subclass that gets a solid buff to its base level 1 feature. That way you don't have to gauge what to do every time shit hits the fan. Now, Note of Potential definitely has potential, pun intended, but I think it requires further polishing when or if this subclass becomes published. Note of Destruction, the first of the three options that you have at your disposal, is only useful at very low levels in my opinion, because if the receiver gets surrounded, yes, you can deal damage, but it scales poorly at higher levels, so it wouldn't be something I'd go for pretty much ever. Note of Protection is probably the best option of the three, especially at higher levels when saving throws become more dangerous than monsters trying to beat your armor class. Note of Ingenuity is solid all around, especially in campaigns that feature exploration and social interactions more prominently, giving your allies more chances to succeed on whatever ability check they need to. At level 6, when you get this feature, Animating Performance, you get a pretty reliable way to have something to do with your bonus action in combat, even if you run out of your pool of Bardic Inspiration dice. I think it's especially neat that using Bardic Inspiration doesn't prohibit you from using the dancing item during the same turn. The item uses similar hit points, attack, and damage scaling mechanics introduced with the Battlesmith Artificer, Wildfire Druid, and alternative Beastmaster Ranger features Unearthed Arcana. It's usable multiple times per day by borrowing some of your 3rd level or higher slots, which bards as full casters have plenty to go around as they keep leveling up. It's solid as it is, however, I'd like for it to not have just a basic generic force slam attack. Instead, why not make it have more variety, similar to how Note of Potential works, by introducing some kind of control action option. For example, it could be producing a melody that charms the foes, or some kind of distracting noises that induce disadvantage on passive perception, one attack roll, or maybe even the next saving throw. This would make it slightly better at higher levels, because in its current state, it pretty much deals the same damage at level 6 when you get this feature, as it does at level 12, 15, and even 20. The dancing item doesn't really increase in damage other than your charisma modifier, which is nowhere close to the amount of hit points that the monsters have at higher levels. Finally, at level 14, you get your Performance of Creation. Creating a large or smaller mundane item worth 280 to 400 gold doesn't seem that powerful at first, but I can see this being used to create temporary wall or some other barrier in a tight corridor when, let's say, trying to flee from powerful foes, or, stopping the surge of water about to wash away you and everyone else. Or maybe you just killed the ancient dragon and are now in possession of its massive treasure hoard, which you can't possibly stuff in your bags, pouches, and pockets. No problem, just make a carriage and let the barbarians and druids pull it around. The 10 feet range at which you can create this item is rather limited, but maintaining it doesn't seem to have this restriction. This feature can easily be a showstopper when used by creative players and out-of-the-box thinkers, because you can seemingly improvise objects of all shapes and forms. Yes, your DM might say that some type of item that you figure out to do is more expensive than whatever the price you can create at any level, but in most cases creating mundane items of very large proportions shouldn't really exceed the value that this item allows you to do. Now, Unity Domain Cleric, these would be the clerics who keep their groups and communities tightly knit together, strengthening bonds and resolving issues and conflicts between individuals they care about. The list of deities isn't really exhaustive, but it's a good starting point if you have no idea what type of deity or divine aspect you're supposed to follow. At level 1, as every cleric does, you get your domain spells, which is an expanded list of spells that you get prepared for free as you keep leveling up. Heroism is the first one. It's always good on characters soaking most of the damage from enemies and monsters, or just cancelling out fear effects many monsters like to inflict on you and your party members. Shield of Faith is a versatile protective spell, quite effective at lower levels for damage mitigation. At higher levels it kind of loses its potency as armor class becomes less and less impactful, but it can still be a nice way to spend your first level slot and increase the survivability of yourself or one of your allies. Aid is one of the best support spells in the game and one of the rare few lower level spells that actually scales well with higher level slots. Warding Bond isn't something that I'd use frequently, especially if your DM likes damaging you with area of effects, but it can help distribute damage more evenly if there's one or two hard-hitting monsters enemies nearby. Beacon of Hope is something most clerics prepare anyway, so getting it for free is even better. In my experience, it's mostly used for healing, but at higher levels, it can be quite effective when dealing with wisdom saves that you and your party members simply have to pass. Sending is a solid utility, especially if fostering relationships with prominent NPCs is at least equally as important as murder hoboing everything in your path. Aura of Purity is one of the stronger 4th level paladin spells that's even stronger on a cleric, considering how you get it for free, and can cast it 6 levels earlier than any paladin out there. Guardian of Faith is one of those cleric spells that you would most likely prepare anyway, because it's both cool and effective, so getting it for free is even more awesome. Greater Restoration is a spell I often recommend. In practice, it actually rarely sees use, at least in my experience, but when you or another party member needs it, it's the best thing ever. Rary's telepathic bond makes so much thematic sense. Establishing and nurturing bonds is your divine duty after all, so it's a great utility on any full caster who can cast spells ritually, and clerics certainly fall into that category. Emboldening Bond is basically Poor Man's Bless, which is mechanically one of the best cleric paladin support spells in the game. It's limited to 2 targets who have to be fairly close to each other. It's usable by those 2 targets only once per turn, but it also works on ability checks, something that Bless doesn't provide. Nothing prevents you from stacking this with Bless itself, so if you're dealing with an especially high armor class monster, or are constantly being forced to roll high DC saving throws, you can add not just 1 but 2d4 on top of all of those 1d20 rolls. Obviously it works on constitution saves as well, so it's good for that. Later, when you or another party member casts counterspell or dispel magic, you can potentially stack it with guidance, and this feature for the extra 2d4 on those spellcasting ability checks. It doesn't seem like much, but throughout the entirety of the campaign, it can significantly increase the number of hits and ability check or saving throw successes that you and your party members obviously succeed or manage to hit. So it's a very, very neat, very solid, reliable feature that you're going to be using pretty much all the time throughout your career. Channel Divinity's Shared Burden is an interesting mechanic, especially considering that all clerics gain 2 Channel Divinity uses per short rest at level 6 and beyond. Unlike Warding Bond's spell, which distributes damage between you and the target of the spell, This channel divinity allows you to protect one of your allies and let you and the others take the damage. Now, you can take all the damage, you can take some damage, but I see this used on allies that fail a saving throw against big area of effect damage like Dragon's Breath Weapon, or just taking a lot of damage from a monster's critical hit. It's definitely situational, but considering you can pick and choose which allies take the damage and how much of it, there's quite a bit of flexibility, especially considering how some races, let's say tieflings or classes, have resistances to certain damage types. So let's say you're a tiefling, and then, you know, there's fire damage, you take most of the damage, and then give the rest of the damage to your allies. At level 6 you get your Protective Bond, which further expands the array of options for Emboldening Bond, allowing the bonded pair to reduce the damage using their reactions. I'm not exactly sure whether activating this feature applies the resistance to the trigger damage, similar to how Absorb Elements spell works, or it only provides resistance to subsequent damage, excluding the triggering one. Now, most monsters or NPC stat blocks come with just 2 or 3 attacks, and it just might happen that the last attack is the one that hits you. Therefore, I would assume the resistance does include the trigger damage, as it only lasts until the end of the current turn, or in other words, until the enemy runs out of its attacks during its turn. Potent spellcasting at level 8, Unity Cleric definitely doesn't feel like some type of martial cleric, so it makes sense to have a standard bump to its cantrip damage at level 8. At level 17 you get your Enduring Unity, which is a feature that again further expands the usefulness of Emboldening Bond feature, eliminating the somewhat restrictive 30 feet distance prerequisite, and giving buffs to one of the 2 bonded characters when the other one gets dropped to 0 hit points. Now, majority of level 17 characters are mortal demigods in terms of their power, so it wouldn't surprise me at all to hear about some party, high level party, actively dropping one of the bonded characters to 0 hit points for another one to gain the buffs, because these buffs are pretty nice. Not sure how the whole unity theme and friendship would fly under those conditions, but nevertheless, advantage on all 3 types of D20 rolls is juicy. Resistance to all damage is a middle finger to your DM's plans. The last option is somewhat fuzzy. I have no idea whose hit dice you're supposed to spend. Is it yours that you spend, or are you spending the hit dice of the 0 hit point bonded partner? I would assume it's the latter, but the wording is definitely unclear, so I guess it would be up to your DM if she ever decides to let you annoy everybody at the table with this cleric subclass. Not saying that friendship and unity are bad things, but let's be real here, forcing everyone to be buddy-buddy with everyone else doesn't really work out in most cases. Finally, my favorite class in the game got another playtest option. The Clockwork Soul draws its power from Mechanus, which is that strange exotic steampunk plane of cute modrons and scary maroots. Manifestations of Mechanus table is filled with flavorful examples, though you can easily come up with all sorts of things on your own if you are a Nerd Dimension fan. A level 1 feature, Clockwork Magic, is ripping a page out of a fair few Unearthed Arcanas from before. Clockwork Sorcerer comes equipped with a bunch of extra spells that you get to learn automatically by just leveling up, which addresses the Sorcerer's notoriously small number of known spells and providing additional ways to mechanically support, pun intended, your character's weird quirks. Alarm makes thematic sense and is actually a solid utility spell to prevent assassins cutting everyone during a long rest, though sorcerers cannot cast spells ritually, so you would have to burn a slot to use it. Protection from Evil and Good is one of those rare few defensive level 1 spells that are always useful when dealing with all sorts of scary monsters. Find Traps is one of the worst spells in the game. You get it for free, but don't ever waste a slot on it. Just forget that you have it because it's really bad. Heat Metal, on the other hand, is somewhat situational, but if your DM likes throwing tough evil knights in full plate armor at you and your party, you're going to have a field day every time she calls for initiative rolls. Counterspell is easily the best spell on this table, sooner or later you will be dealing with some hostile caster flinging nasty spells at you, so you would learn the spell anyway because this is a sorcerer spell, but with this subclass you learn it for free, which means that you get even more spells that you can choose from your sorcerer's list. Glyph of Warding is one of those spells that's really hard to use effectively as a player character in most campaigns, where you're constantly on the move, don't have enough gold, and don't really even have enough time to prepare things in advance. I consider it more of a DM spell, something to royally screw your party with, but with a little bit of creativity you could find some limited use for it. Arcane Eye is usually not the most resource effective way to scout ahead, but it can sometimes reach places that lower level spells like, let's say, Find Familiar, which usually gets used for scouting, typically cannot. Otiluk's Resilient Sphere is one of the better ways to survive a TPK level encounter. Sure, your party members might all die, but at least you'll live to tell a tale. Animate Objects is another spell that you would most likely learn anyway, if you're into messing up your DM's plans. Plus, it makes total sense for a Clockwork Sorcerers to be able to animate objects, right? Wall of Force is one of the most broken spells in the game, so getting it for free only makes the whole subclass even better than it already is. Restore Balance is an interesting level 1 feature as well, and one that can certainly cause arguments at the table. The mechanic is very flavorful for the whole theme of the subclass, one that can affect the chaos in the world and literally affecting it in real time, in real life, as you are rolling your 1d20s or your DM is rolling his or her 1d20s. By default, the DM isn't obligated to disclose whether the monster or NPC is, for example, attacking with advantage. With this in play right from level 1, he or she is basically being forced to tell you that. Now you can totally be a dick and use this feature to fish this information out without actually acting upon it. In most cases, I don't see it mattering that much, and once the 2d20 gets rolled the first time, everybody will know by just the sound that those 2d20s make as they hit the table. However, a lot of D&D is actually being played online, and it's easier for DMs to hide this information if they want or need to do so for whatever reason. So with this subclass, they really won't be able to. Regardless, however, and whatever you play, try not to be a dick. Besides that, there's something really cool about being able to use the character's reaction to literally tell your DM, nope, leave that second d20 on the side for this roll, in real time. Most mechanics usually give bonuses or penalties, and even if they do affect the advantage-disadvantage mechanic, it's usually not as direct and is often tied to some saving throw beforehand. Now, the disadvantage cancelling portion of the feature is more straightforward and much less potentially problematic, as it's almost always going to get used to help your allies have better odds of success, most often with their saving throws. Now, I would assume this feature works on you as well, similar to how most stuff in 5th edition works. It would be slightly weird if the only creature that is totally at the mercy of chaos is a sorcerer that manifests the power of order all around. However, it's not explicitly stated, and that usually results in confusion and Jeremy Crawford's Twitter feed getting bombarded with questions related to it, so it really wouldn't hurt to have it added if this subclass gets released officially. Now, Bulwark of Law, there's no confusion whether this level 6 feature works on you, because it definitely does, it says so in the feature, as well as any other creature within 30 feet of you. It's somewhat generic alternative for spending sorcery points, a pseudo-healing mechanic that has very little to do with the name of the feature. At least I don't see the connection, but maybe my slow Slav brain is just too dumb to connect the dots. In terms of power, I don't think it's particularly powerful, but at the same time it's not useless either. Even though you can definitely save someone's ass with this, I'd still probably save my sorcery points for Quickened, Subtle, and Twinned meta magics. At level 14 you get Trance of Order. This feature isn't overpowered, but it definitely looks pretty powerful to me. The only balancing factor for it is the fact that you have to grind 14 levels to get it, but once you get it, you basically get a, let's say, like a supercharged version of Rogue's Reliable Talent. Thematically, it does make sense that you would be able to affect the chaotic randomness of 1d20 rolls in this way, but it also makes it almost impossible to miss or fail on those rolls, which you can add your proficiency modifier on. Now, the DM can always ramp up the enemy's armor class, he can always ramp up the saving throws or ability checks DCs, but then he or she is adjusting everything for your character specifically, and it can quickly become a recipe for disaster for everybody else. I don't think increasing the sorcery points cost would be a big nerf either, seeing how it significantly reduces the intrinsic randomness of the core system. And something that can be kind of thought about in a way for swapping with this feature is a level 18 feature, Clockwork Cavalcade. This is something that I can get behind a bit easier. In fact, I think, again, this should be swapped with Trance of Order, even though the part about cancelling all level 6 or level spells is borderline overpowered, though definitely somewhat situational. 100 hit point healing isn't nearly as impactful on level 18 as it is on lower levels. Repairing damaged objects is super situational, and spending 7 sorcery points to be able to do all of this again does feel a bit too expensive, but again, this is a level 18 feature, so yeah, I mean, at this point you have 18 sorcery points, so it definitely, like, it's not gonna be too much of a resource consumption. If you are still watching, congratulations, you're one of the rare few that do. So now you might as well animate that thumbs up icon for the YouTube algorithm, bond with the subscribe button, and restore balance by banging the notification bell. And if you think I'm worth it, chuck a buck my way on Patreon, the link is in the description down below. Special shout out to all of my patrons: Mike, Matthew, Ewing, Larry Hocken, BardlyManHardlyTrying, Rogor, Kaleron, SuburbanHell, Albert Kwak, Aidan Harth, Gary Kors, Oldham, C Alcazar, Bredwin, your boy Fox, Sean, Mannozzi Stefano, Adekoya, bittenbi, Jeremy, Sirois, ShatteredSilence, Devin Jache, Lunatic Dragon, Zack McNemar, Darth Xín, Ebonhawk, Jeff, Clem, Alex Bell, Yvette Ehler, Harry Howell, Cracked Mask, Keelan, Udell 18, Russ Helms. Thank you for your continued support, all new and old patrons. With everything said and done, MinMax Munchkin out, and talk to you soon.